Hey guys, in our previous video, we looked at a popular objection against God, which is animal suffering and natural evil. We looked at the biblical story and I pointed out that God did not make the world broken. God made a good world, but the world broke because of human free will when we sinned against him. This idea comes from Genesis 3, when Adam and Eve sinned against God, introducing sin into the world, and God said, "Cursed is the ground because of you." In making that video, I anticipated a handful of questions, concerns, and raging internet objections. I don't expect to answer them all. I'm also filming this video the same day as a previous video, so I don't have comments yet to respond to, but hopefully this will clear enough of the weeds that you can at least appreciate how I handle this very important topic of animal suffering and natural evil. Here we go. First, and this will be quick, your response uses the Bible, but I don't believe in the Bible. I understand that. My point in using the Bible is to show that we Christians who do believe in the Bible are able to make sense of natural evil and animal suffering. When an atheist or a skeptic asks us, why would a good and powerful God allow suffering? They call God good and powerful because they know that our Bible says this about God. So they're the ones bringing the Bible into this conversation, trying to show that the Bible's view of God doesn't make sense. That's why they don't believe it. Our response then is to elaborate further on what the Bible is really saying. Second concern. If there was no brokenness or animal suffering before people introduced sin to the world, then what about mass extinctions before humans even existed? Yeah, modern history of the Earth tells us that there were some mass extinctions in the past, like the dinosaurs, to give one obvious example. How would I respond? Well, a lot of this depends on how much the Christian thinker is willing to accept what the modern history of Earth has to say and how that timeline fits into the timeline of the Bible. There are at least 5 different views Christians have had about the age of the earth and how the Bible story of humankind fits into the picture. That conversation hasn't been much of a focus of mine, so unfortunately, I don't have much to say about it. If it's true that, say, mass extinctions and natural disasters happened before Adam and Eve were created and introduced sin to the world, well, then I guess the best we could say is that the effect of sin was retroactively applied to a time before Adam and Eve, but I don't really know, and it's just not my area of study. Third, even if the world broke after sin, it still seems that the broken world is God's responsibility rather than human choice, so God is to blame. I can see 2 reasons why it would seem this way. First, when God said, "Cursed is the ground because of you," he was in the middle of punishing Adam and Eve for their sin. So we think God could have just not punished and we'd be fine. Second, even if our sin somehow caused the world to break, couldn't God have done things differently and kept the world in a state of goodness? In my reading of Genesis 3, when God speaks after Adam and Eve sinned, it seems like God is both giving judgment and also explaining what just happens now that sin is in the world. Sometimes God says, "I will do this," and other times, like in the case of the world's curse, God says, "because of you." In fact, it could be that God's judgment simply is letting our own bad decisions play out. We see examples of this type of judgment in Romans 1:24, Psalm 81:12, and Ezekiel 23:9. But even still, couldn't God have done things differently? Like, if God is truly good, wouldn't God have prevented the world from becoming broken? In fact, why would God make a world that could be broken? Why would God make a world so vulnerable to sin? These kinds of questions are really difficult to answer, but I don't think they're difficult because there is no good answer. I think they're difficult because, well, now we're trying to understand God's motive, how God thinks, how these invisible spiritual realities like sin and divine judgment and demonic powers interact with one another. We are venturing into very deep theological spaces that, as humans, we really don't have much access to. That said, we can speculate and pick up on a few clues from Scripture. Here's how I think about it. As humans, created by God in God's image, Our purpose is to know God's love, to give him glory, and to celebrate his presence as we find satisfaction in him. So we ask ourselves, what would it take for God to maximize this ultimate purpose in us? What would it take to really draw out our love and praise to God? Say we were just born straight into a perfect world that could never be broken. Well, there's no divine hiddenness of God, okay? We all see him and believe. I could see praise come out of that. But as humans, our passions are drawn to stories, conflict and resolve, trials and endurance, perseverance, bravery. I suspect that God is allowing us to go through a time of extreme difficulty in a broken world because we are part of a dramatic story leading to a happy ending. One day, we will be able to look back and say what Paul said near the end of his life: I have fought the good fight. I have finished the race. I have kept the faith. Now there is in store for me the crown of righteousness, which the Lord, the righteous judge, will award me on that day. And not only to me, but also to all who have longed for his appearing. It seems to me the struggles we experience today will eventually become fuel for joy and satisfaction in our lives to come. The harder it gets, the better it will be. And it will happen when Christ returns to wipe every tear from our eyes and fix this broken world for good. Until then, all people, Christians and non-Christians, experience natural evil and all sorts of extreme difficulty. We also witness the suffering of animals in a broken and hurting world. We long to see the world made right. But for that to happen, all of the evil must be removed, and we have a choice to determine what side of that story we wish to be a part of. So, I'll leave you with that. Hope that helps. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.